Well, thank you very much. I'm here to talk a little bit about things that are not commonly discussed in this type of forums, and maybe a little bit different, but let's try. Introduction first, who am I, and why do I talk about this? Some of you know me, at least my name has been announced here a couple of times, and I've been working 30 years in the IXP world. EuroIX, been on the board for a couple of sessions, running the Norwegian IX, LINX118, for nearly 30 years. Will be 30 years in March of this year, actually. So I've been in this industry for a long time, but I've also been in a different industry or different branch, and it's called intelligence oversight, which is oversight over intelligence services, which is a very, very specialized field. We're a handful of people doing that in Europe and not much in the rest of the world. But I've been doing that for more than 20 years as well, since 1999. And that is with a Norwegian parliamentary committee that has the responsibility, and I'm one of their support crew. The support crew is quite big, with 22. 7 of us is technology oriented, the rest of them are legal, but we are supporting them. And what do we do? Well, we oversee the major, or really all, but focus on major intelligence and secret intelligence services in Norway, which is the military, the Norwegian Intelligence Service, it's the police security service, and also the National Security Authority. So we oversee them, and we have the same role in Norway as IPCO, Investigative Powers Commissioner's Office here in the UK. They're located not far away from here. So we cooperate quite a lot with them, actually. So I've been in this area recently. And our job is to check that these services, these secret services that try to keep things secret and not in the public, our job is to see that they follow the law. If they don't, we complain to them, and they have to change what they do and delete data or whatever has been their wrongdoings. And every year we have an annual report, and if there's something, well, that cannot wait for an annual report, we publish a special report. And the good thing about these reports is that they're all public and unclassified. They're even translated into English if one of you will be interested. So this is kind of why I'm here. I have one leg in the IXP industry and one leg in this strange secret world that nobody knows about. So why I'm here is because the Norwegian Intelligence Service, the military intelligence, they got a new law 2 years ago. And that law is very special from a law concerning a secret service. It is extremely detailed. If I, 5 years ago, had written the same words that is now in the law, and especially in the pre-work to the law, had written that and given it out as a book, I would have been in jail for 20 years. Because suddenly all their methods are named and you have an idea of how they're working. Of course, not detailed, but you have an overview. And the reason for this is that the military intelligence themselves think that they have to be a little bit more open, because they cannot be just hiding away in a corner. They have to be in the open, especially to get people. They have to recruit people like us to do their job. And if nobody knows what they're doing, nobody will work for them. So this is a trade-off, of course. But this very detailed list of methods makes it possible for people like me to stand here on stage and talk about it without being arrested, which is a good thing. So one of the new methods that was introduced in this law was bulk cable interception. Has not been allowed for the military intelligence before, so it's a new method. And it's communication crossing the Norwegian border. So they're not allowed to do this inside Norway, and, well, if they do it abroad, nobody cares. We don't, at least. Military intelligence, when they operate abroad, unlawful territory, but it's like it's what it is. But this is crossing the border of Norway. That's the important thing. And they can use it for military intelligence only, and only a few very specific purposes, like anti-terrorism, counterintelligence, those kind of important things for a military intelligence service. And it's very, very limited what they can share with others, like the secret police. So even there might be information collected that could solve a crime, like a murder case, it's not allowed to be used for solving such cases. It has been a long public debate in Norway, and there's a lot of public information. This is different from country to country. In Sweden, it was the same, like 15 years ago. In the Netherlands, 10 years ago, it was the same. But in many other countries, like in the UK, there has been no public debate about this, as far as I know. It has just been the same type of method has been introduced slowly, and GCHQ is running this in the UK. And, well, it's what it is. That's the normal way of doing these things. So I'm here to inform you about this method. It might be informative for you, may be interesting. And I also would like to hear comments. Obviously, there's a number of questions I can't answer. And we're on the very edge of this meeting. But if you have any questions, I'll hang around there for a few minutes after the meeting. So I would like to hear any thoughts. And I'll try to answer questions as well. So this has a horrendous name in Norwegian. Sorry for that. But what is bulk collection? I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but it is when you have a communication link and you collect all the information on the link. Not just picking things, but you really collect it all. And when you do that, most of the information is of no interest for you as an intelligence service. But the problem is that you don't know what is of interest until you have use for it. So you have to collect it all, store it, and then when you have use for it, then you can pick up the small pieces, the breadcrumbs that you need from this huge amount of data. It goes without saying that collecting such large amounts of data will contain a lot of personal and sensitive information. But that's what it is, and the law must then reflect that so that the control mechanisms are good enough when you see what they will collect. This kind of bulk collection is common in most European countries today. I think Norway is one of the last countries to the table, although the law does not always reflect that this is lawful in a number of countries. There has been a number of rulings in the EU court and the European Court of Human Rights. For you in the UK, there's been two very big cases, Big Brother Watch versus the UK, and also Privacy International versus the UK. And there has also been a case in Sweden, Centrum for Rättvisa, and in France, La Quadrature du Net. And all of these cases has had a very defining function for these kind of methods. So there's a number of requirements now for this type of bulk collection to be legal in any country in Europe. And also there is a lot of kind of knowledge now about these methods as methods. The effect of this is that a lot of countries have now, most countries I would say, are changing the laws. Here in the UK as well, there's a revision of the laws concerning this, to get it in line with these new requirements from these European courts. So even though you're not part of the European Union, we're not part of the European Union, we're part of Europe and the European Charter of Human Rights, that gives us the framework. So this bulk collection in Norway, it's called, well, Facilitated Collection of Border Crossing Communication, Tilrettelagt Innhenting in Norwegian, or TI, so I'll use the TI name for it, else we'll sit here until evening. And it's part of the new law then for the military intelligence. So the question is, who must facilitate for this? Because the facilitate word is someone has to facilitate this for the intelligence service. They're not allowed to go in for themselves. And there is two sentences in the law. It says that first, that providers covered by a part of the Electronic Communications Act is covered by this. They have to facilitate. And also a very general sentence saying providers of internet-based communications or messaging services available to the public. In effect, all providers of public services, public digital services or networks in Norway will have to facilitate for this method. So if you are present in Norway, any of you, and having a public service, selling it for money, you will be under this law. You have to comply. If the military intelligence comes along, asks you to hand over data crossing the border, yeah, you have to. But how to control this? Because my job is not doing this bulk collection. My job is to check that bulk collection is done within the limits of the Norwegian law. So it is, as I talked about, these rulings from the different European courts, they give us the framework, and then the law kind of defines it more detailed. And there's two things that we, from a technology, we from a control perspective, are very looking into. The first of them is the end-to-end safeguards, which means that the whole process from the start of the collection until the data has been used or shared or whatever, each step should be controlled. It's not enough to have just a court saying, yes, you can do that, or someone checking the end result. There should be controls all the way. And also, there should be more than one control body. It should be several independent control bodies. So it shouldn't be kind of an internal auditor in the military service or an internal auditor maybe in the Department of Defense. It should be really independent. And since we are a part of the Norwegian Parliament, then not part of the government, we are seen as independent from the government. And what has been done in Norway, which is our way of doing it, it's different here in the UK. We have a special court that decides what the service can, what project they can do and not do. So they are in before they start any activity. The court must say, okay, you can do this. And that is one of them, the independent bodies. And then we come in as a second independent body, and we take over as soon as they start, and we follow their operation during the operation, and afterwards, what do they do with the data that they have collected. So between us, the court and us, we should, at least in theory, have a full control from end to end, which is a requirement in Europe. So, but how does this TI work, and how do we plan to control it? And of course, now I'm drawing a slightly complicated picture, and I can't go into very, very detail, but what I'm drawing here is actually taking the words of the law and drawing it up as a picture. So you have this communication between Norway and the rest of the world, and it crosses the border at some point. Sorry. And the operators that have this communication, that do this communication, they must mirror their traffic. They're not allowed to change it, delay it, anything like that, but they have to mirror the traffic. And if there's encryption that the operator is in control, like link encryption, something like that, they must remove that. But if it's an end-to-end encryption thing, they are not allowed to touch that crypto, just send it on as it is. So this traffic then goes to the military intelligence service. And they split it into really 3 different production chains. The first one is a snapshot testing system where they can have 30-second snapshots, 1 snapshot an hour, and they can store it for a maximum of 2 weeks. And they have tools then to just look at this from a technical perspective. They're not allowed really to look at the content. They can look at the technical to understand protocols, to understand the communication links, to get a better view of what is actually going on, how does this work, as a tool to set up the rest of the system in a correct fashion. So this they're allowed to do without going to court, because this is not for intelligence production. They're not allowed to use anything here in their intelligence work. This is just technical work. And it has to be separate personnel doing this, separate equipment. There should be a high electric fence between this and the rest. There isn't, of course, but had been useful. And our task then is to go in and look at the systems and look at their workforce and everything to see that they actually only have these 30-second snapshots, that they delete them after 2 weeks, and that the person working in this field doesn't work in the intelligence production field. It has to be separate people. So this is what they can do all the time. Then the other part of this is their intelligence production part. And to be able to use data from this, they have to go to court first. So they have to have some case that they will go to court and say, okay, to do this task, we need to use this method. And the court will then probably eventually say yes. And they will be able to use the data. And the first thing they have to do is to remove traffic from Norway to Norway. So ideally, if one Norwegian is sending email to another Norwegian, even using Gmail or whatever, that traffic should be stopped. They should delete it. Of course, that's very difficult, but we have some other cases. Because in Scandinavia, or in the Nordics, there's a lot of companies covering all the Nordics. So you might have, let's say, a telephony provider having all their systems in Sweden. So all traffic goes from Norway to Sweden and back to Norway. Norway being a long, thin country, the fastest way from the south to the north is through Sweden and Finland. That is definitely Norway to Norway traffic, just crossing the border and back in again. A number of those things will be required to remove. And our task then is to try to find out, do they actually remove all they can? We don't think they can do 100%. From Germany, we know that they had this discussion at DKIX, and they were talking about 95, 96, 97%. We don't know where this will end up, but that's our job to look at it, and if we think it's too bad, we'll have to raise our voices. I say we have to because I should also say this is not in production yet. They're in the build-up phase because the last part of the law is not in place, so they won't be given any court orders yet because that is not in place. So they can do only the technical part, but we are planning. The other part now is metadata. After you've removed everything that you're not allowed to look at, you can then remove the content and store metadata for 18 months. And you have tools to look at the metadata, of course. Just having it stored in a big database isn't useful unless you have some good tools. But to be able to use these tools, you once again have to have a court order. So the first court order will be, okay, you can look at this, or you can collect from this link, and then you collect your metadata, and then when you want to use them, you have to go to court again with a more specific request to get to be allowed to look at the metadata that you think can strengthen your case or give you some information. So that is the metadata production line. There's also a production line for content. We have a content filter and storage and content tools, but here we have to have a court order before you store any content. So the metadata production line is kind of collecting metadata so that you afterwards can go in and look at it, while the content, you can only get content after you have the court order. So two different parts of it. This is something that's done in Norway. A lot of countries don't have different rulings for metadata and content, like in the Netherlands. They treat it the same. So they can store both metadata and content for, I think it's 2 years. So, of course, that'll be a lot more data, but they have a different opportunity. So this is the system as it is proposed and almost in action. But these green court order parts are not yet in operation. So what will operators be asked to do? This is specified in the law, but I thought I should mention it here. It's the English translation says facilitate selection, filtering, testing, collection, storage, and queries as described in this chapter. So it's trying to be fairly specific. And And in the pre-work, it is even more specific. You should mirror and transmit the communications in real time to the intelligence service. You should provide technical information about the communication so that the military intelligence don't have to reverse engineer the traffic. And you should also allow them to have equipment at your site and assist in the operations and maintenance. Norway being a long-thin country, it might be operators all throughout Norway that will be affected by this. And the military intelligence will probably not have personnel spread out throughout the country. So if you're a provider somewhere where the intelligence service is not present, you might have to assist them. And this is about encryption. If there's encryption you're in control of, you should remove it before you send it over to them. And there's also another part that says that you should keep it all confidential, which makes it difficult for us because we cannot talk to an audience in Norway like this and then ask people, who of you have been contacted by the Secret Service? Show hands. No, we can't because you're not allowed to show your hands. So it makes it more difficult to kind of talk about this in Norway or get a discussion about this in this level of detail. Have to be special forums for that, hopefully. But there's a good thing for operators as well. If you have any expenses doing this, the law says that you should get your money back. How this is supposed to be calculated, I don't know. That will be interesting, but that's not one of the things we are looking at. But for you as operators, that could be an important part. The timeline is that the law as such is in effect, but it is a restriction that they're not allowed to use this for intelligence production, so they don't get those court orders, so they can't fill data into that part of the system. They can only do the testing and build the system. But we anticipate that this last part of the law will come into effect this spring, late spring, May-ish. Snow may take some time to melt in Norway this spring, but in the May time frame, and after that they will be able to go into production. So that was what I planned to talk about. I can try to answer questions if there's time.
Who has the first question? Yes, over here. Thank you.
Hi. Question about the metadata you mentioned earlier, and I suspect you might not be able to answer this, but I'm curious, does that metadata form things like NetFlow records? Like, what does that metadata kind of look like that they export?
What's stated in the law is that the intelligence service should make a list of different metadatas, and we should see the list, but it will be classified.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Oh, we have another one. Sorry, quick.
Just a quick one. With regard to the actual bulk interception, does the initial physical interception have to take place inside a provider point of presence, or do they have the legal right to actually go to, for example, a cable landing station and make a cut and splice there?
The law says that the operators that operate a communication system should facilitate this. So the intelligence service won't go in themselves and do cable cuts, etc. But if they go to a fiber operator and say, hey, we want to have a copy of the traffic on this fiber, the operator might have to splice in something to get everything mirrored out. But how this will end up or become, I don't know at the moment, and I might not be able to tell you if I knew. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.